The elevator doors were still closing when Matteo Conti saw it. Sarah Davis, his assistant, the woman who kept his calendar, his empire, and his sanity from collapsing, had her arms around a man in the lobby corridor, her cheek pressed to his shoulder like she belonged there. Matteo's body moved before his mind caught up. His suit jacket pulled tight across his shoulders as he crossed the marble floor with controlled speed, the kind that made grown men step aside without understanding why. His jaw locked. His eyes burned. For weeks, he'd told himself he wasn't that kind of boss. Not the kind who watched. Not the kind who cared. But watching Sarah hug someone like that hit him like a switch flipping inside his chest. His hand shot out, palm flat against the elevator frame, forcing the doors to stop reopening with a soft chime. "Mr. Conti?" the security guard inside said, confused. Matteo didn't look at him. Matteo looked at Sarah. She didn't see him yet. She was still holding the man, laughing softly. Her shoulders relaxed in a way Matteo almost never saw in the office. A laugh that did not belong to the corporate floors of Conti Holdings. A laugh that belonged to someone who felt safe. Matteo took 2 more steps, stopping close enough to hear the last words the man murmured near Sarah's ear. "Still my girl," the man said, voice warm, teasing. "Still bossy." Sarah pushed him back, lightly, still smiling. "I'm not bossy. I'm efficient." The man grinned. He was tall, broad, clean-cut, expensive coat, hair perfectly styled. His face, too young. Matteo's anger sharpened into something darker, because Matteo knew the city. He knew the men who tried to get close to power, and Sarah, whether she understood it or not, stood at the doorway to his. Matteo's voice came out low. "Sarah." Her head snapped up. The smile vanished so fast it almost looked like it had never existed. Her posture straightened, the professional mask sliding into place with practiced speed. "Mr. Conti," she started, then stopped because Matteo wasn't walking like a boss. He was walking like a man who'd just seen something he couldn't accept. The other man noticed it too. His eyebrows lifted, like he'd just found the source of a pressure change in the room. Matteo stopped right in front of them. Close. Too close. His eyes went to the man's hands, still near Sarah's waist, like he hadn't realized he needed to move them. Matteo spoke without raising his voice. That was worse. "Who is this?" Sarah's lips parted. For a second, she looked like she might laugh at how serious he was. Then she didn't, because Matteo's expression wasn't a joke. "It's—" Sarah began. The man stepped forward first, offering his hand like he owned the air around them. "Ethan Davis," he said, polite and calm. "Nice to meet you." Matteo stared at the hand, then at Sarah, then back at the man. "Davis," Matteo repeated, slow. Sarah swallowed. "Yes, he's—" Matteo didn't take the hand. His gaze stayed on Sarah, like he was waiting for the truth to come out of her mouth, not his. Sarah's cheeks flushed, not with guilt, but with something closer to embarrassment. "Mr. Conti," she said carefully, "this is my father." Silence landed hard. Matteo's breath stalled in his chest. Her father. He looked maybe mid-30s, maybe early 40s at most. A face that still belonged in a tailored campaign poster. A man who could walk into a room and get attention without trying. Matteo's eyes flicked again, measuring, recalculating. Sarah added because she could see Matteo still processing it. "He had me young, and he takes—" She paused, clearly annoyed. "Very good care of himself." Ethan Davis's smile widened, amused. "I do yoga. It's a lifestyle." Sarah shot him a look. "You do yoga twice a year." "3 times, Ethan corrected, still grinning. Matteo stood there, feeling something unfamiliar and dangerous in his body. Relief mixed with humiliation. He didn't do humiliation. He didn't do misunderstandings. And yet his pulse was still too fast, and his hand still wanted to control something, anything, because he'd been ready to tear a stranger apart with his eyes in the middle of his own lobby. Sarah's voice softened, still professional, but not cold. "I didn't know you were coming down." Matteo finally moved his gaze to Ethan's hand again. He took it. One firm shake, no extra warmth. "Matteo Conti," he said. "I know," Ethan replied, friendly but not intimidated. "My daughter talks about you." Sarah's head snapped toward her father. "I do not." Ethan laughed. "You do, constantly. Mr. Conti needs this. Mr. Conti wants that. Mr. Conti's schedule is impossible. I'm starting to think you live here." Sarah's face went hotter. Matteo should have felt calmer now. But Ethan's words did something else. Because Sarah did live here, in a way. She was always there. Early mornings, late nights, fixing problems before they reached Matteo's desk, protecting his time like it was sacred. Matteo had always told himself she was just good at her job. Now he wasn't sure he believed that explanation anymore. He looked at Sarah's hands. One of her nails was chipped, tiny, barely noticeable. But Matteo noticed it. Because he noticed everything about her lately, and he'd hated himself for it. "What are you doing here?" Matteo asked Ethan, still too controlled, like he was forcing the subject into business so he wouldn't have to acknowledge what just happened in his head. Ethan tipped his head, picking her up for lunch. Sarah sighed. "I told him I was busy. And I told her," Ethan said, "that busy is not a personality trait. It's a warning sign." Matteo's eyes narrowed slightly. Sarah lifted her chin, defensive. "I'm fine." Ethan looked at her with the kind of affection Matteo had never witnessed up close, not in his world. "You're tired." Sarah rolled her eyes. "I'm employed." Matteo's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Sarah noticed. Of course she did. She reached into her own blazer pocket, already pulling out a small notepad like she was about to fix something for him out of habit. "Is there something urgent?" she asked. Matteo watched her. The way she shifted instantly into his rhythm, even while standing next to her father, even while being someone else for a moment. His chest tightened. "No," Matteo said. Sarah blinked. "No?" Matteo didn't love the way her surprise made him feel. He was the boss. He wasn't supposed to enjoy the fact that she cared enough to be surprised. He stepped closer, again, too close, so only she could hear him. "You should go to lunch," he said quietly. Sarah stared up at him, confused, searching his face like she was trying to understand if he meant it. Ethan watched, amused, clearly reading something Sarah wasn't. Sarah hesitated. "Mr. Conti, the 2 p.m. call." "I can handle a call," Matteo cut in, still low. "I've done it before." Sarah's lips pressed together, fighting a smile that threatened to break through. Because Matteo Conti was many things, but easygoing wasn't one of them. Ethan gave a low whistle. "Wow, look at that. He's human." Sarah groaned. "Dad, please." Matteo's eyes slid to Ethan. "If you embarrass her," Matteo said, calm and threatening without needing a single aggressive word, "I'll have security walk you out." Ethan's grin didn't fade. "If you make her work through lunch every day," Ethan replied pleasantly, "I'll embarrass you." Sarah froze. Matteo froze. Because the idea of anyone embarrassing Matteo Conti in his own building should have been ridiculous. Yet Ethan Davis said it like he could do it. And somehow Matteo believed him. Sarah exhaled, defeated. "Okay, fine, lunch." She turned to Matteo, more serious again. "I'll be back in an hour." Matteo's eyes held hers. An hour. The thought of Sarah leaving, even for an hour, shouldn't have mattered, and yet it did. He forced his voice to stay steady. 2 hours. Sarah frowned. "That's not what you—" "2," Matteo repeated. Ethan laughed again, delighted. "I like him." Sarah shot Matteo a look like, "Please don't make this weird." Matteo didn't answer, because it already was weird. It had been weird for months. He just hadn't admitted it. Sarah adjusted her blazer, then looked at Matteo like she was checking whether the world was still normal. It wasn't. Not with Matteo watching her like that. Not with Ethan watching Matteo like he'd already figured something out. Sarah walked away with her father toward the building exit, and Matteo stood there, still in the lobby, still feeling the heat of his jealousy like it had nowhere to go. His security guard cleared his throat behind him. Sir, do you want me to? Matteo didn't turn. No, he said, but his eyes followed Sarah until the glass doors swallowed her. And the second she was gone, Matteo's phone buzzed again. He pulled it out. A message from an unknown number. I saw you in the lobby. You looked ready to kill someone. Is your assistant yours now? Or are you still pretending? Matteo's thumb hovered over the screen. His body went cold, because almost nobody had access to this building without him knowing. And someone was watching close enough to catch his expression. Matteo typed one word, then erased it. He looked up at the cameras above the lobby, and for the first time in a long time, Matteo Conti wondered if the real danger wasn't the world outside. It was the fact that Sarah Davis was starting to matter to him more than control ever did, and someone had noticed. Sarah slid into the passenger seat of her father's car and immediately exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 10 hours. Ethan started the engine, glancing at her with a sideways smile. So, Sarah closed her eyes. No. Ethan pulled out smoothly. Yes. She opened one eye. We are not doing this. Ethan's smile grew. We're absolutely doing this. Because I have never seen a man stare at you like he wanted to drag you into an elevator and lock the doors. Sarah choked. Dad. Ethan lifted one hand in surrender, still laughing. What? I didn't say it was a bad thing. Sarah pressed her forehead against the window, mortified. Please drive. Ethan drove. Unfortunately, he also talked. You know, he said casually, I've met powerful men, politicians, CEOs, people who smile while they lie. But that man... Sarah's stomach tightened. He's my boss, Ethan hummed. That man is obsessed with you. Sarah sat up too fast. He is not. Ethan glanced at her. Sarah. He didn't blink for like 10 seconds. Sarah crossed her arms. He was surprised. Ethan nodded. Sure, surprised, with jealousy. Sarah's face heated again. He was not jealous. Matteo Conti doesn't get jealous. Ethan made a thoughtful sound. Oh, he does. He just does it with expensive suits and murder eyes. Stop, Sarah said, half laughing, half panicking. You're making it worse. Ethan shrugged. Fine. I'll behave. They drove in silence for exactly 12 seconds. Then Ethan said, So do you want him? Sarah's head snapped toward him. Dad. Ethan's tone stayed calm. I'm asking because I'm your father, and I know you. Your voice changes when you say his name. Sarah stared at him like he'd betrayed her. Ethan smiled. There it is. Sarah looked away, jaw tight. It's complicated. Ethan parked outside a small upscale restaurant Sarah loved, but never had time to visit. He turned off the engine and looked at her fully now, serious beneath the teasing. Tell me the complicated part, he said. Sarah swallowed, because the complicated part wasn't work, not really. The complicated part was that Matteo Conti made her feel things she'd sworn she wouldn't feel again. The complicated part was that he was careful with her in quiet ways, like he noticed when she skipped breakfast, like he sent food to her desk without asking, like he walked her to her car late at night and acted like it was just security protocol. The complicated part was that he never touched her, never crossed the line. Yet sometimes, when he stood too close, Sarah felt like the line was already burning between them. Ethan watched her expression soften without her permission. I see it, Ethan said gently. Sarah forced a scoff. You see nothing. Ethan reached over and squeezed her hand. I see my daughter, who gives too much, and I see a man who thinks he doesn't deserve softness, but he wants it anyway. Sarah's throat tightened. She pulled her hand back, not because she didn't want comfort, but because she didn't want to cry in a car at lunch. I'm fine, she insisted. Ethan tilted his head. Are you happy? Sarah's answer should have been easy. She had a good job. She had her own apartment. She had independence. She had control. But lately, she'd been tired. Not just physically, emotionally. Because being near Matteo Conti felt like living beside a door that was always half open, inviting her into a life she didn't know how to step into. I don't know, Sarah admitted quietly. Ethan nodded like that was enough truth for now. Okay, then lunch. And after lunch, we'll do something radical. Sarah narrowed her eyes. What? Ethan smiled, innocent. We will not talk about your boss for 30 minutes. Sarah laughed despite herself. Impossible. They went inside. The hostess recognized Sarah and smiled warmly. Ms. Davis, your usual? Sarah froze. My usual? Ethan leaned closer, whispering loudly. Oh, she's a regular now? Interesting. Sarah glared. I came here twice. They sat, ordered, and for a moment Sarah almost relaxed, until her phone buzzed. A calendar alert. 2:01 p.m. Confidential call. Mr. Conti. Sarah's chest tightened. She checked the time. 1:12 p.m. She could make it back. She always made it back. Ethan watched her instantly shift into work mode again and sighed. Sarah. I know, she said, already reaching for her phone to text Mateo. I said 2 hours, Ethan caught her wrist gently. Don't. Sarah blinked. Dad. He kept his voice calm but firm. This is lunch. You are allowed to eat without apologizing to a man who can buy entire buildings. Sarah's eyes flicked away. You don't understand. Ethan leaned in. I understand more than you think. You're scared that if you're not perfect, you'll be replaceable. Sarah's breath caught. Ethan softened. But sweetheart, if he replaces you because you took lunch, he doesn't deserve you. Sarah swallowed hard. Then her phone buzzed again. A text. Mateo. Where are you? Her fingers hovered. She typed. With my dad. Lunch. Back soon. 3 dots appeared immediately. Mateo. 2 hours. I meant it. Sarah blinked at the screen. Ethan watched her face. What? Sarah tried to keep her voice neutral. He said, 2 hours. Ethan's grin returned. Oh, he's gone. Sarah shook her head, but her lips betrayed her with the smallest smile. And then another message came through, from an unknown number. He let you leave? Interesting. He won't once he realizes what you are. Sarah's stomach dropped. Her smile vanished. Ethan noticed instantly. Sarah. She stared at the screen, pulse rising. I just got a weird text. Ethan's expression sharpened. Show me. Sarah hesitated, then turned the phone. Ethan read it, his playful energy disappearing like a light switching off. That's not funny, he said quietly. Sarah's voice went thin. It's not my dad teasing. It's someone else. Ethan looked around the restaurant, scanning faces like he'd done it 1,000 times in other situations. Sarah frowned. Dad, why are you looking like that? Ethan's jaw tightened. Because I don't like strangers watching you. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Neither do I. She forced herself to breathe, forced herself to look normal, forced herself to keep her hands steady, but her mind raced. What you are? What did that mean? Sarah was an assistant, a woman with a job and a life, nothing secret, nothing dangerous. Unless, Sarah's stomach turned as a thought formed. Unless someone knew something about Mateo, something about his world. And they thought Sarah was more than she seemed. Ethan reached across the table and covered her hand again, warmer this time. Listen to me. Sarah's eyes lifted. Ethan's voice stayed low. You're not alone. You hear me? Sarah nodded, but she didn't feel steady. Because the message wasn't just creepy. It was specific. It implied a person who understood power games, and it implied they were close enough to watch Mateo in the lobby, close enough to watch Sarah now. Sarah looked up, scanning the restaurant with new fear, trying to spot a stare that lingered too long, and then her phone buzzed again. This time it was Mateo. A call. Sarah stared at the screen. Ethan didn't tell her what to do. He just watched, serious, protective. Sarah answered. Mr. Conti? Mateo's voice came through low and controlled. Too controlled. Sarah, he said. Where exactly are you? Sarah swallowed. A restaurant, Midtown. A pause. Then Mateo said, Stay there. Sarah's heart jumped. What? Why? Mateo's next words were quiet, sharp, and not like him at all. Because I just got a message too. Sarah's blood went cold. What message? She whispered. Mateo exhaled once, like he was trying to keep his voice steady. One that said, Mateo replied, if I want to keep you, I'll have to prove it. Sarah's fingers tightened around the phone. Ethan leaned closer, hearing enough to understand it was serious. Sarah's voice shook. Mateo, who is doing this? Mateo didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was darker, protective in a way Sarah had never heard from him so directly. I don't know yet, he said, but I'm coming to you. Sarah's stomach flipped, not with fear alone, with something else, something dangerous, because Matteo Conti coming to her, showing up in public, stepping into her space, was a line they had not crossed. And if someone was forcing him to cross it. Sarah stared at her father, who was already standing, already ready. And Sarah realized the next 2 hours weren't going to be about lunch at all. They were going to be about who wanted her attention, and why. And what Matteo Conti would do when he decided she was worth protecting. And the biggest question Sarah couldn't stop thinking was, if Matteo finds whoever is behind this, will he still be able to keep his feelings under control? Matteo Conti arrived like the building belonged to him, even though it didn't. The restaurant's glass door swung open and the entire room felt it. Not because he was loud, he wasn't. Not because he demanded attention. He didn't have to. He walked in with calm precision, dark suit perfect, sleeves tailored, expression unreadable, except for his eyes. His eyes weren't business. They were locked on Sarah. Sarah stood the moment she saw him, heart doing something stupid in her chest. She'd seen Matteo in meetings, in boardrooms, in private elevators, in his office after midnight, when the city lights made the windows look like a wall of stars. But seeing him here, where she was supposed to be just a normal woman having lunch with her dad, felt intimate in a way she wasn't ready for. Ethan was already on his feet too, his protective stance subtle but unmistakable. Matteo crossed the room without hesitation. He stopped in front of Sarah first. Are you okay? He asked. No, Ms. Davis. No, my assistant. No professional distance. Just, are you okay? Sarah's throat tightened. I'm fine, just confused. Matteo's gaze dropped to the phone in her hand, then back to her face. Show me. Sarah hesitated for half a second, then handed it over. Matteo read the message. His jaw flexed once. Ethan watched him closely. You got one too? Matteo didn't even glance away from the screen. Yes. Sarah's stomach turned. What did it say? Matteo lifted his eyes to hers. Not something you needed to read. Sarah straightened. Matteo. That use of his first name came out before she could stop it. The air between them changed instantly. Matteo's eyes narrowed. Not angry. Something else. Something hot and sharp that made Sarah's skin feel too aware of her own body. Ethan coughed politely. Well, that's interesting. Sarah shot her dad a warning look that begged him to stay quiet. Ethan ignored it. Matteo finally answered, voice controlled. It said someone knows where you live. Sarah's blood went cold. Ethan's expression hardened. What? Sarah's voice went thin. How would anyone? Matteo handed her phone back, not taking his eyes off her. That's why I came. Sarah tried to breathe normally, tried not to show how much that sentence affected her. Not just because it was scary, but because it was Matteo. He had crossed the city to get to her, not to the office, not to a meeting, to her. Ethan folded his arms. So what now? Matteo's gaze flicked to Ethan for the first time. A beat of silence, two men measuring each other. Then Matteo said, Now you go home. Sarah blinked. What? Matteo's voice stayed low. You're done for the day. Sarah stared at him like he'd lost his mind. I have a 2 p.m. call and I'll take it, Matteo cut in. Sarah opened her mouth. Matteo stepped closer, just enough to block the restaurant's noise from her ears. His scent hit her. Clean, expensive. Something subtle that made her mind go stupid for half a second. "You're shaking," he murmured so only she could hear. "I'm not," Sarah lied. Mateo's eyes dipped to her hands. She hated that he was right. He leaned in slightly. "Sarah?" One word. Her name. It did more to her than it should. "I need you safe," he said. Her chest tightened. "I am safe. This is probably just—" Mateo's gaze sharpened. "Don't minimize it," Sarah swallowed. Because Mateo didn't get like this unless it was real. And because hearing him say he needed her safe felt dangerously close to hearing him say he needed her. Ethan cleared his throat again. "I hate to interrupt whatever. This is—" Sarah groaned. "Dad." Ethan lifted his hands. "I'm just saying the chemistry is loud, that's all." Sarah's face flamed. Mateo didn't look embarrassed. He looked annoyed that Ethan had noticed, which was somehow worse. Mateo's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression turned colder. "What?" Sarah asked. Mateo's voice was calm. "Someone just used your work badge." Sarah froze. "That's impossible. It's in my purse." Mateo looked at her purse. Sarah grabbed it instantly, unzipping it with quick fingers. Badge, wallet, phone, already in her hand, keys, lip balm, everything. Sarah's eyes went wide. "It's here." Mateo's gaze went distant for a second, calculating. Then someone copied it. Ethan's jaw clenched. "That's not a prank." Sarah's heart hammered. "Why would someone do that? I'm not important." Mateo's eyes snapped back to her, sharp. "Don't say that." Sarah blinked. His tone wasn't just protective. It sounded personal, like it offended him that she didn't understand what she meant to him. Mateo's phone buzzed again. He read, then his mouth tightened. Ethan leaned forward. "What now?" Mateo's eyes stayed on Sarah. "They want me to come back to the building alone." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Alone?" Mateo nodded once. Ethan scoffed. "Yeah, no." Mateo's voice stayed even. "It's not a request." Sarah's throat tightened. "Mateo, don't do whatever they want." Mateo's expression didn't change, but his gaze softened just a fraction. "I'm not doing what they want," he said. "I'm doing what I want." Sarah's breath caught. "And what do you want?" Mateo held her eyes. "For you to stop pretending you're not the reason I'm willing to burn my whole schedule today," he said quietly. Sarah went still. Ethan made a sound like he'd just won a bet. Sarah glared at him. "Dad!" Ethan lifted his hands. "I'm silent. I'm silent. Wow." Mateo's eyes didn't leave Sarah. Sarah's mind raced, trying to hold on to logic, trying to keep her feet on the ground. But the way Mateo looked at her right now made it hard to remember what professional even meant. She swallowed. "This isn't the time." Mateo stepped closer anyway, close enough that his voice warmed as it dropped lower. "It's always the time," he said, "because you've been in my life every day, and I've been pretending it's normal." Sarah's heart slammed. She forced herself to whisper, "Mateo." His gaze flicked to her lips for half a second, then back to her eyes. He didn't touch her, but the restraint was its own kind of intimacy. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, suddenly remembering he was standing between two people who were about to forget the rest of the world existed. Sarah pulled back a fraction, breathing hard. "What are you saying?" Mateo's voice went quiet. "I'm saying I followed you to the elevator because I couldn't stand the thought of you leaving without me seeing you," he admitted. Sarah froze, because that was not something Mateo Conti ever confessed, and because it made her feel seen in a way she had secretly craved. Her voice shook. "You followed me?" Mateo's jaw flexed, like he hated admitting it. "Yes." Sarah blinked rapidly, trying to stay composed. "Because of work?" Mateo's eyes narrowed, almost offended. "Don't insult me." Sarah's stomach flipped. Ethan muttered, "I like this guy." Sarah whispered harshly, "Dad." Mateo's phone buzzed again. This time, Mateo didn't look at it immediately. Sarah did. Because the tension between them was so thick, she felt like the phone was the only thing keeping her from floating away. Mateo finally checked. His expression turned ice calm, and that scared Sarah more than anger. He showed the screen to Sarah and Ethan. A photo, taken from inside Conti Holdings. The photo showed Sarah's desk, and on her desk, neatly placed like a gift, was a single white envelope. On the envelope was written her name in bold black letters. Sarah Davis. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Ethan's face went hard. "They're in the building." Mateo's voice stayed steady. "Yes." Sarah whispered, "What's in the envelope?" Mateo looked at her, then said something that made her pulse spike in an entirely different way. "I think it's something they believe belongs to me," he said. Sarah frowned, confused and terrified. "Why would anything on my desk belong to you?" Mateo's eyes held hers. Because he knew the answer, and he didn't say it out loud, but Ethan did. Ethan pointed between them, blunt as ever. "Because they think she's yours." Sarah's breath caught. Mateo didn't deny it. He just reached for Sarah's elbow, guiding her gently, possessively, toward the exit. "We're leaving," Mateo said. Sarah swallowed. "Where are we going?" Mateo's voice was calm, but it carried a promise that made her entire body wake up. "To my place," he said. Sarah froze mid-step. "My place?" she repeated, stunned. Mateo's eyes didn't soften. "If someone is close enough to put something on your desk," he said quietly, "then you don't go home tonight." Sarah's heart pounded. Ethan looked between them. "Okay, that's actually smart." Sarah stared at Mateo, mind spinning. Going to Mateo's place was not a small thing. It wasn't work. It wasn't normal. It was stepping into his world, his private space. A space Sarah had imagined more times than she would ever admit. And now, with fear pressing in from the outside, Mateo was offering it like a shield. Sarah's lips parted. "Mateo, He leaned in, voice low enough to feel like a secret pressed against her skin. "Trust me," he murmured. Sarah's stomach fluttered, heat rushing through her despite the tension. Because the way he said it didn't sound like a boss giving an order. It sounded like a man asking for something deeper. Sarah nodded once, barely. "Okay," she whispered. Mateo's hand stayed at her elbow as he guided her out. And the moment they stepped onto the sidewalk, Sarah felt it, felt the city shift around them. Like someone was watching. She glanced across the street. A black car sat parked at the curb, engine running. The windows were dark. Mateo's gaze followed hers. His posture changed instantly. Subtle, lethal calm. Ethan stepped closer to Sarah. Sarah whispered, "Is that—" Mateo's voice dropped. "Get in my car." Sarah's pulse roared. Because in that moment she understood something she hadn't allowed herself to think before. This wasn't just someone messing with her. This was someone trying to push Matteo Conti into revealing exactly how far he'd go for her. And as Matteo opened the door for her, his hand briefly brushing her waist, protective, careful, intimate, Sarah realized the real danger wasn't only the threat outside. It was what would happen once she was alone with Matteo behind locked doors. And the envelope waiting on her desk might contain the one truth neither of them was ready to face yet. Because if Matteo read it, it could change everything between them. The elevator doors closed behind them with a sound that felt final. Sarah leaned back against the mirrored wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest, trying to slow her breathing. Matteo stood in front of her, one hand braced casually against the railing, body angled just enough to block the reflection of anyone else. Too close. Not touching. The worst combination. Neither of them spoke as the elevator rose. The hum of the cables filled the silence, thick with everything they weren't saying. Sarah broke first. "You didn't have to bring me here." Matteo's eyes stayed on the changing numbers above the door. "Yes, I did. That's not—" She stopped herself, exhaling. "This isn't normal." Matteo finally looked at her. His gaze was steady, dark, focused in a way that made her stomach flip. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." The elevator dinged softly. Private floor. Mateo stepped out first, scanned the hallway out of habit, then turned back to her. "Come," he said, gentle but firm. Sarah followed. The penthouse opened into a wide, quiet space. Warm lighting, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. No clutter, no personal chaos. Everything had a place. It looked exactly like a man who controlled everything would live. Sarah paused just inside the door. "It's beautiful," she said. Mateo closed the door behind them and locked it. The sound clicked in her chest. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the couch. Sarah hesitated. "I'm fine standing." Mateo didn't move closer. He just looked at her. "Sarah," he said calmly, "you've been on your feet since 6 this morning. Sit." She rolled her eyes, but she sat. Mateo disappeared into the kitchen area and returned with a glass of water, placing it in her hands before she could refuse. "Drink." She did. Only after did she realize how dry her throat had been. Mateo sat across from her, not beside her, resting his forearms on his knees, posture open but alert. For the first time since this started, Sarah felt like she could breathe, until she remembered why they were here. "What's going on?" she asked quietly. Mateo didn't answer immediately. He stood, walked to the window, stared out at the city like it might give him answers. "Someone is testing me," he said finally. Sarah frowned. "Testing you how?" "By using you," he replied. Her stomach tightened. "I don't like that sentence." Mateo turned. "Neither do I." He came back, stopped a few feet away. "You are not the target, Sarah. You're the leverage." Sarah crossed her arms again. "That's comforting." "I didn't say it was comfortable," he said. "I said it was true." She swallowed. "Why me?" Mateo's jaw tightened. "You're visible," he said. "You're close, and you matter." The last part landed too hard. Sarah looked up at him. "Matter? Professionally?" Mateo held her gaze. "No." Silence stretched between them. Sarah's heart pounded. "Then how?" Mateo exhaled slowly, like he'd reached a point where pretending was no longer possible. "You are the one person in my world who isn't afraid of me," he said. "You challenge me. You keep me human. And you don't want anything from me except honesty." Sarah's voice dropped. "You don't give that easily." "No," he agreed. "I don't." She searched his face. "So someone noticed?" "Yes." Sarah leaned back, stunned. "That envelope, what do you think is inside?" Mateo's mouth tightened. "A warning, or proof, or both." "Proof of what?" "That my enemies know my weaknesses." Sarah scoffed softly. "You don't have weaknesses." Mateo stepped closer. "You are sitting in my living room," he said quietly. "That should tell you how wrong you are." Her pulse spiked. He stopped just in front of her, close enough now that she could feel the heat from his body, smell the clean scent of him. He still didn't touch her. That restraint felt intentional. "Sarah," he said, low, "did anyone ever approach you? Ask questions? Offer you something?" She shook her head. "No, nothing like that." "Any strange calls before today?" She hesitated. "A few hang-ups. I ignored them." Mateo's eyes darkened. "You shouldn't have had to deal with that alone." "I didn't think it mattered," she said. "I didn't want to bother you." Something flickered across his face, regret, sharp and fast. "You never bother me," he said. The words were simple. The meaning wasn't. Sarah looked down at her hands. "Mateo, this is getting dangerous." "Yes," he said calmly. Her eyes snapped back up. "You're not even pretending it isn't." "No," he replied, "because I won't lie to you." She took a shaky breath. "Then tell me this." He waited. "If this escalates, if it puts me in real danger, what happens?" Mateo didn't hesitate. "I end it," he said. "How?" "Completely." Sarah frowned. "And what?" Mateo met her gaze. "This." Her heart stuttered. "This... what?" He gestured subtly between them. Whatever this has been turning into. The words hit her harder than the threat outside. She stood abruptly. You'd cut me out? If it keeps you safe, he said. Her chest tightened. That's not protection. That's punishment. Mateo stepped closer. It's survival. Sarah shook her head. You don't get to decide that alone. He watched her, surprised. I don't belong to your world, she continued. But you don't get to remove me from it like I'm a liability. Mateo studied her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. You're angry, he noted. Yes, she snapped, because you're treating this like a chess move. It is, he said. And I'm not a piece, she replied firmly. Silence fell again. Then Mateo did something unexpected. He smiled, just slightly. That, he said quietly, is exactly why you matter. Her anger faltered. Sit, he said gently. She hesitated, then sat again. Mateo lowered himself beside her this time, not touching, but close enough that their knees almost brushed. If I push you away, he said, it's because I don't trust the world around me. Sarah looked at him. Do you trust me? Mateo turned his head, eyes locked on hers. With my life. Her breath caught. She whispered, then don't decide without me. A long pause. Then Mateo nodded once. Okay. The word felt like a promise. A soft knock echoed through the apartment. Sarah jumped. Mateo stood instantly. Stay. He moved toward the door with controlled speed, checked the camera panel, then unlocked it. A man in a suit stood outside, holding a slim envelope. Mr. Conti, he said respectfully. This was delivered to the building. Addressed to you. Marked urgent. Mateo took it. You checked it? Yes, no devices, no substances. Mateo nodded and closed the door. Sarah stared at the envelope in his hand. Her name wasn't on this one. His was. Mateo walked back slowly, eyes never leaving the envelope. He sat across from her again. This came from the same sender, he said. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. What does it say? Mateo slid a finger under the seal. He opened it. Read. His expression didn't change. That scared her more than if it had. What? She asked. Mateo looked up. They're offering a deal. Her stomach dropped. What kind of deal? Distance, he replied. From you. Sarah went still. They want you reassigned, he continued. Transferred, out of my orbit. Her heart pounded. And if you refuse? Mateo folded the letter calmly. They escalate. Sarah swallowed. So what are you going to do? Mateo leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm going to let them think they're winning, he said. Sarah frowned. How? By giving them what they asked for, he replied. Her breath hitched. You're letting me go? Mateo's eyes softened, just a fraction. I'm letting them think I did, he said. Sarah stared at him. Mateo. He reached out then, finally, his hand wrapping gently around her wrist, warm, steady. You trust me? He asked quietly. Her pulse raced under his fingers. She nodded. Yes. Mateo's thumb brushed her skin once, barely there, electric. Good, he said, because the next few days are going to look like I walked away from you. Her chest tightened. And did you? Mateo leaned in, close enough now that his voice felt like it belonged only to her. No, he murmured. I just stopped pretending. Sarah's breath shook, because in that moment, fear faded into something far more dangerous, hope and desire, and the knowledge that whatever was coming next would test not just Mateo's control, but her heart. And as Mateo released her wrist, leaving behind the echo of his touch, Sarah realized one thing with terrifying clarity. Walking away would be easier than staying, and neither of them was choosing easy anymore. Mateo had been clear the night before. For this to work, it had to look real. He had said it on his couch, eyes steady, voice calm, in the same tone he used for business decisions. But Sarah had heard the other meaning under it, how much it would cost him to act as if she didn't matter. Now, in the guest room of his penthouse, Sarah stared at the ceiling and felt that cost in her own chest. The room was quiet, clean, and carefully arranged. A glass of water sat on the nightstand. The curtains were half open, letting in pale morning light. Everything smelled fresh, as if someone had made sure there was nothing that could distract her from the plan. Sarah sat up slowly and listened for footsteps. Nothing. She swung her legs off the bed and reached for her phone. A buzz came the moment her fingers touched it. Mateo. Today starts now. Follow my lead. No reactions, no explanations. Sarah read it twice. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. She typed back, I understand. I'm ready. 3 dots appeared. Stopped. Then another message arrived. Mateo. Good. Because today I become distant. Sarah's stomach dropped. She stared at the screen, then set the phone down and pressed her palm to the center of her chest, trying to slow her heartbeat. Okay, she whispered to herself. Okay. She stood and got dressed. She chose what always helped her stay composed: clean lines, neutral colors, nothing soft. A fitted blazer, simple earrings, hair smooth and controlled. Her makeup explained nothing. When she stepped into the main room, she paused. The penthouse was brighter now. The city stood tall beyond the windows. The kitchen looked untouched, like Mateo had already been awake and had already decided not to leave any sign of restlessness. Then she heard a low sound, water running. She turned. Mateo was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled once, tie already on, coffee cup in hand. He looked calm in the way only he could look calm. Like he hadn't spent the night planning how to keep her safe without making her feel trapped. He didn't smile. He didn't step closer. He didn't say her name with the warmth he'd used the night before. He simply nodded toward the counter. A second cup of coffee was waiting for her, cream and sugar already right. Sarah's breath caught. He knew her order. Of course he did. She walked over, keeping her steps steady. Morning, she said quietly. Mateo's voice was controlled and professional. Morning, Ms. Davis. The title felt final. Sarah kept her expression neutral, even when the words stung. You didn't have to make me coffee. I make coffee, Mateo said, as if the habit had nothing to do with her. You're leaving. Sarah wrapped her hands around the cup. It was warm. It calmed her more than she wanted to admit. Yes, she said. For the show. Mateo's eyes flicked to her mouth for half a second, then back to her eyes. For the plan. Sarah nodded once. How do we do this? Mateo answered with no extra words. You don't look for me. You don't call me unless you have to. You act like you're busy, annoyed, and done with me. Sarah lifted an eyebrow. That last part is going to be the hardest. Mateo's mouth tightened slightly, like he was stopping himself from reacting. You can do hard things. Sarah took a small sip. And you? Mateo held her gaze. I act like I don't care. Sarah could see it in the timing of the words. He hated saying them. Her voice softened. You're not good at that. Mateo leaned one hand on the counter, keeping the distance between them exact. I'm very good at it, he said. I just don't want to be. Sarah's chest tightened. She set the cup down carefully. Mateo. He cut her off gently, still controlled. Today isn't about what we want. It's about what they believe. Sarah nodded. Fine. Mateo's eyes stayed on her. When you get to the building, HR will move you. Let it happen. Don't argue. Sarah blinked. You already arranged that. Yes. And everyone will notice. Yes. Sarah let out a slow breath. That's going to feel humiliating. Mateo's jaw tightened. I know. For a second, his hand moved as if he wanted to touch her. Just her wrist, her elbow, something small. He stopped himself before it happened. Sarah watched the restraint and felt heat rise under her skin, mixed with frustration. You're doing it already, she said softly. Mateo's eyes darkened. Doing what? Being distant? Sarah whispered. Mateo's voice stayed low. If I don't start now, I'll fail in front of them. Sarah swallowed. Okay. She turned toward the door, then stopped and looked back. One thing. Mateo didn't move. Say it. Sarah forced a small, steady smile. Don't forget I'm still me, even when you act like I'm not. Mateo held her gaze for a beat too long. I could never forget that. She left before her face gave her away. Conti Holdings looked the same from the street, but inside, it felt sharper. Sarah walked through the lobby with her head high. She could feel a tension on her. The guards nodded politely, but their focus was stronger than usual. A receptionist smiled a little too quickly, then looked down at her screen. Sarah rode the elevator up alone, hands clasped in front of her, phone heavy in her bag. When she stepped out onto her floor, conversations dropped in volume. Keys clicked slower. Someone cleared their throat and stopped. Sarah walked toward her desk, eyes forward. Her desk was empty, not messy, not reorganized, not missing one item. Empty. Her mug was gone. Her photo with her father was gone. Her sticky notes, her pens, her file folders. Even the small plant she kept alive out of stubbornness was gone. Sarah stopped for half a second, just one. Then she set her bag down with controlled care, as if this was normal, as if nothing inside her had just fallen apart. A co-worker from the neighboring desk, Lena, someone Sarah had shared quick smiles with over late nights, stood slowly. Sarah, what happened? Sarah kept her voice calm. I'm being reassigned. Lena frowned. Why? Did you? No, Sarah said, cutting it off gently. Nothing like that. Lena glanced toward Mateo's office, then back to Sarah. Did he? Sarah's jaw tightened. I don't know. It was a lie, but it had to sound real. Before Lena could speak again, a man in a suit approached with a slim folder in his hands. HR. Ms. Davis, he said politely. Mr. Conti asked me to escort you. Escort. The word hit again. Sarah nodded once. Where to? Temporary reassignment, he replied. A different office. Which floor? Sarah asked. The man hesitated, then gave the truth. Different building. Lena's eyes widened. A different building? Sarah's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression steady. Fine. The HR man lowered his voice, almost sympathetic. I'm sorry. I know this is sudden. Sarah looked at him. Is it permanent? No, he said quickly. No, ma'am. Temporary. Sarah nodded. Then let's go. She followed him without looking back. Because she knew that behind the glass walls, Mateo was watching her walk away from the life they'd built through routine and long days, and she refused to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. Mateo did watch. From his office, he saw Sarah stop at her empty desk, saw her speak to Lena, saw her nod once to HR as if she expected it. He didn't move. He didn't open his door. He didn't call her back. His head of security stood behind him, voice low. They're tracking expressions, sir. They have eyes on the floor. Mateo's hands were clasped behind his back so tightly his knuckles ached. Let them watch. Your lack of reaction is convincing, the man added. Mateo didn't answer. He stared at the space Sarah had filled every day and felt a tight pressure in his chest. He went back to his desk, sat down, and forced himself to sign papers he didn't care about. When his phone lit up with a message from Sarah, one simple line, probably moved. I'm okay. He stared at it for 3 seconds. Then he turned the screen face down, because he wanted to respond, because he wanted to say, I hate this, because he wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, and because he couldn't. Sarah's new office was in a quieter building across town, with fewer executives and more paperwork. The desk was clean, the chair too stiff, the lighting too bright. People greeted her politely, but no one looked at her like she mattered. That was the point, she reminded herself. Still, her chest felt empty. A manager introduced himself and spoke for 5 minutes about temporary restructuring. Sarah nodded and took notes even though she didn't need them. She asked the right questions. She smiled at the right moments. She did her job even while her mind kept drifting back to Mateo's kitchen. to the cup of coffee he'd made without saying her name like it mattered. At noon she escaped to the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and let her shoulders drop for the first time all day. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. "You look smaller without him." Sarah's breath caught. Another message arrived before she could move. "Smart move. Distance suits you." Her fingers curled around the phone. Heat rose in her face. Not fear exactly. Anger. The kind that wanted to get loud. She forced herself to breathe. She typed, "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who knows you don't belong to him." Sarah stared at the screen, heart racing hard enough to make her palms damp. She stood, stepped out of the stall, and washed her hands slowly, watching her own face in the mirror. Her expression looked normal, controlled. Good. She walked back into the stall, locked it again, and called Matteo. It rang once, twice. His voice answered, cool and professional. "Sarah, you shouldn't be calling me." The distance in his tone hurt, even though she knew it was planned. "I got messages," she whispered. "They're still watching." A pause, then his voice softened just a fraction. "Tell me." She read the messages. Silence. Then Matteo said, calm and sharp, "Good." Sarah frowned. "Good. It means they believe I let go," he said. "It means the mask is working." Sarah swallowed. "I hate the mask." "I know," Matteo said quietly. Her throat tightened. "Then why does it feel like I'm the one losing something?" The pause was longer this time. When he spoke again, the words were low, honest, and more personal than he should risk. "Because you're the only thing in my life that isn't replaceable." Sarah's eyes burned. She pressed her forehead to the stall door. "Then don't disappear." "I'm not gone," Matteo said. "Even when it looks like I am." Sarah breathed slowly, forcing herself steady. "What do I do now?" "Listen," Matteo said. "Tonight you don't go home." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Someone followed your car this morning," Matteo replied. "You didn't notice." Her pulse spiked. "Matteo." "I handled it," he said. "But it tells me they're close." Sarah's voice shook. "So where am I supposed to go?" "My sister's," Matteo said. "She's discreet. She'll keep you comfortable." Sarah exhaled, trying to stay calm. "You planned everything." "Yes," Matteo admitted. "Except how much I'd hate not touching you." Sarah closed her eyes. That one sentence made her feel too warm for the cold bathroom stall. "I hate it too," she whispered. "Good," Matteo said quietly. "Hold on to that. It keeps you honest." The call ended before she could say more. Sarah stayed still for a moment, phone pressed to her cheek, trying to keep the comfort of his voice. Then she stepped out of the stall and froze. A woman stood at the sink, applying lipstick with calm precision. She looked expensive without trying. Her hair was perfect. Her eyes were sharp. She met Sarah's gaze in the mirror. "You don't look like someone who enjoys distance," the woman said casually. Sarah's stomach tightened. "Do I know you?" The woman capped her lipstick. "No, but I know you." Sarah straightened. "You're the one sending the messages." The woman smiled faintly. "I wanted to see if you'd break." Sarah held her ground. "Did I?" "No," the woman said, almost impressed. "You didn't run. You didn't panic. You called him." Sarah's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" The woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I want to know how far Matteo Conti will go before he chooses love over control." Sarah's pulse raced, but her voice stayed steady. "He already chose." The woman tilted her head. "Did he? Or did he choose strategy again?" Sarah didn't blink. "He chose me." The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Interesting." Sarah's hands clenched. "Who are you?" The woman's smile returned, small and controlled. "Someone who is tired of men like him thinking they can keep everything private and controlled." Sarah's chest tightened. "So you decided to use me to prove a point?" The woman shrugged lightly. "I decided to see if he could be real." Sarah stepped closer. And what if I didn't want to be your test? The woman's eyes moved over Sarah's face. You didn't look forced in his penthouse. You looked drawn to him. Sarah's cheeks heated. That's none of your business. It became my business the moment I saw him in the lobby, the woman replied, the moment he lost control of his expression. Sarah's throat tightened. You were there. The woman nodded once. Yes. Sarah's voice dropped. So what now? The woman leaned in, voice quiet. Now I see what he does next. Because today was the easy part. Distance is easy for him. Sarah's stomach flipped. And what's hard? Truth, the woman said. Public truth. Sarah's heartbeat jumped. You want him to announce something? I want him to stop hiding what makes him human, the woman replied. If he refuses, this continues. If he chooses you openly, it ends. Sarah stared at her, forcing herself calm. And if he chooses openly, I become visible in a different way. The woman's eyes softened for the first time, just slightly. You become protected because everyone knows where he stands. Sarah hated how much that sounded like Matteo. The woman stepped back, checked her reflection, and smiled as if this was normal conversation. I'll be watching, she said. Sarah's voice was calm but firm. If you come near my father, I won't stay polite. The woman's smile widened, amused. Good, he chose well. Then she walked out, leaving Sarah with a pounding heart and a clear understanding. This wasn't about scaring Sarah into leaving. It was about pushing Matteo into choosing. Sarah walked out of the restroom with her head high, but her mind moved fast. When she reached her desk, her phone buzzed again. Matteo. Don't reply to unknown numbers. Pack up at 4. I'll send a car. Sarah stared at the message, then typed one line back, careful and simple. Sarah. Okay. Thank you. 3 dots appeared. Matteo didn't type. A minute passed, then one final message arrived, and it made Sarah's breath catch. Matteo. Tonight we talk about what we are. No more hiding. Sarah stared at the screen, chest tight, fingers trembling slightly. Because the next step wasn't strategy, it was truth. And she didn't know if she was more afraid of what the world would do with that truth, or how much she wanted it anyway. The moment Sarah stepped into the black car at 4 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Unknown. Number. Tomorrow morning. If he stays silent, you'll pay for it. Sarah's stomach tightened so fast she felt it in her throat. She didn't type back. Matteo had warned her. She locked the screen and forced her hands to stay still on her lap. The driver didn't look at her in the mirror. He drove like he'd done this 1,000 times. Smooth turns, steady speed, no unnecessary stops. Mr. Conti said you'd be with us for the evening, ma'am, he said politely after a minute. With you? Sarah repeated, trying to keep her voice calm. With his family, the driver clarified. His sister. Sarah's chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't only fear. Matteo's sister meant a real door into Matteo's life. Not the office, not the controlled glass walls and schedules. Family. Sarah stared out the window as the city moved past. She kept thinking about Matteo's last message from the bathroom. Tonight, we talk about what we are. No more hiding. It sounded like a promise. It also sounded like a line being crossed. Sarah wasn't naive. She understood what being close to a man like Matteo meant. People watched him. People studied him. People wanted to use anything that mattered to him. But now she also understood something else. Matteo was done acting like she didn't matter. And someone had decided to turn that into a public test. The car pulled up in front of a townhouse in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. Warm lights glowed behind the windows. It didn't look like a fortress. It looked lived in. Sarah exhaled slowly as the driver opened her door. You're safe here, he said, still professional. Ms. Conti has security. Discreet. Sarah nodded. Thank you. As she stepped up to the door, it opened immediately, as if someone had been watching from inside. A woman in her early 30s stood there in a soft sweater and jeans, hair in a loose bun, holding a wine glass like she'd decided 5 minutes ago that the evening would be calm no matter what the city was doing. "You must be Sarah," the woman said, smiling. Sarah blinked. "Yes. I'm Olivia," she replied. "Come in before you freeze out there." Sarah stepped inside. The house smelled like coffee and something warm from the kitchen, fresh bread maybe. The kind of smell that made you feel human again. Olivia looked her up and down once, then gave her a sympathetic smile. "You look like you've been holding your breath for 2 days." Sarah let out a laugh that sounded tired. "That obvious?" "Mm-hmm," Olivia said. "Don't worry, I'm not scary." Sarah's eyebrows lifted. "Are you sure? You're related to Mateo." Olivia's grin widened. "That's fair. But no, I'm the normal one." Sarah tried to relax, but her shoulders still felt tense. Olivia noticed immediately. "Shoes off or keep them on. I don't care," Olivia said, waving a hand. "But I do care that you eat something." Sarah hesitated. "I'm not hungry." Olivia gave her a look. "That's what people say right before they pass out dramatically on my hardwood floors. Come on." She guided Sarah into the kitchen and pointed to a stool at the counter. Sarah sat automatically, as if her body was grateful for permission to pause. Olivia set a plate in front of her, something simple and comforting. Bread, cheese, fruit. Nothing fancy. "Eat," Olivia said. Sarah stared at the plate. "You sound like him." Olivia's smile turned softer. "Yeah, he's not the only one who notices when you don't take care of yourself." Sarah took a small bite and realized she really was hungry. Olivia leaned against the counter, studying her gently. "He didn't tell me details," she said. "He just said you needed somewhere safe and quiet." Sarah swallowed. "Does he ever tell anyone details?" Olivia laughed. "No, he tells the truth like it's a limited resource." Sarah smiled despite herself, then looked down at her hands. "I don't want to cause problems for him." Olivia's expression sharpened a little. "You didn't cause this." Sarah glanced up. "You know someone is doing this on purpose." Olivia nodded slowly. "I know enough." Sarah exhaled. "Then you know the part that scares me isn't the messages." Olivia tilted her head. "What scares you then?" Sarah hesitated, then admitted it quietly. "How much I care." Olivia's eyes softened. "Yeah." Sarah's voice got smaller. "And if I care this much, it means he can hurt me without trying." Olivia didn't rush to comfort her. She stayed honest. "He could," Olivia agreed. "But Sarah, if he's involving you in his real life, not hiding you in some private corner, that's not him being careless. That's him choosing." Sarah's throat tightened. "He said tonight we talk about what we are." Olivia's smile turned knowing. "He said that?" Sarah nodded once. Olivia lifted her glass. "Finally." Sarah blinked. "Finally." Olivia took a sip. "He's been stuck for months, not because he doesn't feel it, because he does. He just hates being vulnerable." Sarah looked down again, cheeks warm. "I thought it was in my head." Olivia shook her head. "No, it wasn't." Sarah took another bite, then whispered, "What if all of this public pressure makes him go back into control mode again?" Olivia stepped closer, voice calm. "Then you remind him who he is when he's not hiding behind work." Sarah let out a breath. "That's a lot." Olivia shrugged lightly. "He's a lot. You're handling it." Sarah's phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. She checked. "Mateo." "I'm coming to Olivia's. Don't be scared if I look cold at first. I'm being watched." Sarah stared at the message. Olivia watched her face. "That's him." Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes?" Olivia leaned in a little, voice lowered like a conspirator. "Okay, rule in my house. I will not flirt with your man." Sarah choked on a laugh. "Olivia?" "I'm kidding," Olivia said, grinning. "Mostly." Sarah shook her head, smiling despite the tension. Olivia pointed at Sarah's phone. "Text him back. Something simple." Sarah typed with steady fingers. "Sarah, I'm okay. I'm here." She hit send. A minute later. "Mateo. Good. Tonight we speak like two people." Not like boss and assistant. Sarah's chest tightened. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Olivia watched her expression. He's going to try to be brave, she said softly. Sarah looked up. He doesn't need to be brave. He just needs to be honest. Olivia nodded once. Exactly. Mateo arrived just after 8. Sarah heard the door open, heard Olivia greet him, heard the low tone of his voice in response. Controlled, measured. The voice he used when he knew a room could turn against him. Sarah stood without thinking, her body reacting before her mind could. Olivia glanced at her and mouthed, "Breathe." Sarah did. Mateo stepped into the kitchen doorway and stopped. He looked the same as always. Dark suit, clean lines, perfect posture. But his eyes betrayed him. They landed on Sarah like he'd been holding something tight inside his chest all day, and seeing her made it loosen. For 1 second, the cold mask slipped. Then it returned. "Sarah," he said evenly. "Mr. Conti," Sarah replied, playing her part. Olivia rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh my God, stop. This is my kitchen." Mateo's jaw flexed slightly. "Olivia." Olivia waved a hand. "I'm going to the living room. You two can have 5 minutes of being weird in peace." Mateo didn't argue. Olivia disappeared around the corner. Silence fell. Sarah stood still, heart pounding. Mateo took 2 steps closer, slow, careful, then stopped at a respectful distance. He looked at her like he was memorizing her face again. "You're okay?" he asked, voice lower now. Sarah nodded. "I'm okay." Mateo's eyes moved over her. No touching, no claim, just attention. "Did anyone follow you?" "No," Sarah said, "and Olivia fed me like I was a stray cat." Mateo's mouth tightened in what almost looked like a smile. "Good." Sarah swallowed. "You look exhausted." Mateo's voice stayed controlled. "I had a long day." Sarah's gaze lifted. "Because of me?" Mateo's eyes sharpened. "No." Sarah held his gaze anyway. Mateo exhaled slowly, the truth slipping out. "Because of what they tried to make you." Sarah's chest tightened. "Mateo?" He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel his heat. He still didn't touch her, but his presence did what touch would have done. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Sarah blinked. "For what?" "For making you feel like you had to earn safety," he replied. "You should have had it automatically." Her throat tightened. "You were trying to protect me." "I was trying," Mateo corrected softly. "And I hated every minute of being distant." Sarah's breath caught. "So stop." Mateo's jaw flexed. "Not yet." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "Not yet?" Mateo's voice dropped. "Because tonight isn't only about what I want. It's about what you want." Sarah stared at him. He continued, steady and serious. "I can decide things in a boardroom. I can move people and money and schedules, but I won't decide you." Her heart thudded hard. Mateo held her gaze. "Tell me the truth. Not what you think I need to hear." Sarah's voice got quiet. "The truth is, I want you to stop pretending I don't matter." Mateo didn't blink. Sarah added, almost whispering now, "And I want you to want me in a way that doesn't make me feel like a secret." Mateo's eyes darkened. He took one more step closer, so close now that Sarah had to tilt her chin up slightly. "I do want you," Mateo said, voice low and precise. "More than I should." Sarah's breath shook. Mateo lifted his hand slowly, giving her time. "May I?" he asked. Sarah's eyes flicked to his hand, then back to his face. "Yes," she whispered. Mateo's fingertips touched her cheek gently, like he was careful with something valuable. His thumb brushed once, slow, controlled. Sarah's eyes closed for half a second, relief washing through her. Mateo's voice turned even quieter. "I didn't touch you for months because I didn't want to blur the line." Sarah opened her eyes. The line was already blurred. Mateo's mouth tightened slightly. "I know." Sarah's hands moved on their own, resting lightly against his chest. She felt his heartbeat, steady, strong, faster than he would ever admit. "You told me tonight we talk about what we are," she said softly. Matteo nodded once. "Yes," Sarah swallowed. "Then say it." Matteo stared at her for a long second, then said it plainly, without drama. "I want you," he repeated. "In my life, not in the shadows, not only at work." Sarah's breath caught. "And what does that mean to you?" Matteo's gaze didn't move. "It means I will stand beside you in public. It means I will stop letting anyone think you are a tool." Sarah's chest tightened. "And it means everyone will look at me." Matteo's thumb moved again, slow. "They will," he admitted. "But they will look at you because I'm proud, not because you're exposed." Sarah whispered, "You're sure you can do that?" Matteo's expression turned firm. "I already did it today." Sarah blinked. "What did you do?" Matteo hesitated, just a fraction. Then he said, "I agreed to a morning meeting." Sarah's stomach tightened. "With who?" Matteo's eyes stayed on hers. "The person behind this." Sarah's body went still. Matteo's voice remained calm. "I went alone. I spoke. I made it clear." Sarah swallowed. "Who is she?" Matteo's jaw tightened. "Her name is Victoria Hale." Sarah's heart jumped. "The woman in the restroom." Matteo nodded once. Sarah's voice rose slightly despite her effort to stay calm. "You know her?" "I do," Matteo admitted. Sarah pulled her hand back from his chest, shock and anger mixing. "And you didn't tell me?" Matteo caught her wrist gently, not forceful, just stopping her from stepping away. "Listen." Sarah's eyes flashed. "I was tested, threatened, moved like a piece, and you knew the person doing it." Matteo's voice stayed steady. "I didn't know it was her at first." Sarah froze. "What?" Matteo exhaled. "I knew someone was pushing. I didn't know it was Victoria until today." Sarah's throat tightened. "Then why was she doing it?" Matteo looked at her carefully. "Because she's my aunt." Sarah's breath caught. Matteo continued, voice controlled but honest. "She sits on the family trust. She controls voting power in the company until certain conditions are met." Sarah stared at him. "Conditions?" Matteo's jaw flexed. "Stability, reputation, proof that I'm not reckless." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "So she decided to test your heart like it's a business report." Matteo's voice got lower. "Yes." Sarah shook her head, anger rising. "That's insane." "It is," Matteo agreed, "and I told her to stop." Sarah's voice trembled. "Did she?" Matteo's eyes held hers. "Not completely." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Matteo." Matteo stepped closer again, careful. "That's why tomorrow morning matters." Sarah swallowed. "What happens tomorrow morning?" Matteo's voice stayed steady. "She wants one thing." Sarah's hands clenched. "What?" Matteo didn't hesitate. "She wants me to name you openly," he said. "Not as my assistant, as the woman I chose." Sarah's heart slammed. Matteo added, quieter, "And she wants to hear it from you too. That you're here because you want to be, not because you're afraid to lose your job." Sarah stared at him, overwhelmed. Matteo's hand returned to her cheek, grounding her. "I won't ask you to do anything you don't want." Sarah's voice went small. "If I say no, what happens?" Matteo's jaw tightened. "Then she keeps control, and she keeps pushing, and people like her keep thinking they can play with your life." Sarah's throat tightened. "So if I say yes, it ends." Matteo's eyes softened. "It ends." Sarah looked down, breathing hard. Matteo waited. He didn't push. The silence felt heavy, but also respectful. Sarah finally whispered, "I hate that she did this." Matteo nodded once. "So do I." Sarah lifted her eyes. "But I don't hate you." Matteo's gaze sharpened. "Say that again." Sarah swallowed. "I don't hate you." Matteo's voice went quieter, almost rough. "Good." Sarah's hand slid back to his chest, slower this time, calmer. "I'm scared," she admitted. Mateo's thumb brushed her cheek again. I know. Sarah's voice steadied. But I don't want to be a secret. Mateo's eyes held hers. You won't be, Sarah whispered. Then kiss me. Mateo froze for half a second like he was deciding how careful to be. Then he leaned in and kissed her, slow, controlled, deep enough to be real without rushing. Sarah's body softened instantly. Her hands gripped his suit lightly, pulling him closer. Mateo's arm wrapped around her waist, firm and warm, holding her like he'd wanted to for a long time. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I've wanted to do that, he said quietly, since the first week you worked for me. Sarah exhaled shakily. You could have. Mateo shook his head once. Not like this. Sarah whispered. Like what? Mateo looked at her, serious. Like I mean it. Sarah's chest tightened in the best way. A soft sound came from the living room. Olivia clearing her throat dramatically. Just letting you know, Olivia called out. I can hear the silence. That's how I know you're kissing. Sarah's face flamed. Mateo's mouth tightened like he was fighting a smile. Olivia. Olivia laughed. I'm happy for you, but also, you owe me for emotional distress. Sarah covered her face for a second, then laughed quietly, relief spilling out. Mateo's hand stayed at her waist, anchoring her. He lowered his voice. Tomorrow morning, I'll be in that room with Victoria and 2 board witnesses. Sarah's laughter faded as reality returned. Mateo continued, calm and clear. I will speak first. Then you will speak only if you want to. Sarah swallowed. And if I freeze? Mateo's eyes held hers. Then you squeeze my hand and I'll finish for you. Sarah breathed out. And after? Mateo's voice softened. After, we go back to work like adults. We set boundaries. We keep it respectful, but we stop hiding. Sarah whispered. And what are we then? Mateo didn't hesitate this time. We're 2 people who chose each other, he said. On purpose. Sarah's heart pounded. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A new message. Victoria Hale, 9 a.m. Sharp. Bring her. 1 sentence from you, 1 sentence from her. Then this ends. Sarah stared at the screen, pulse loud in her ears. Mateo watched her face. She texted? Sarah nodded. Mateo took the phone gently, read it, then looked back at Sarah. We don't go in scared, he said. We go in steady. Sarah swallowed hard. And if she's not satisfied? Mateo's expression turned firm. Then I stop asking. Sarah's breath caught. What does that mean? Mateo's voice dropped. It means I'll take control back from my family, even if it costs me comfort. Sarah stared at him, heart racing. Because that wasn't a business threat. That was Mateo choosing a life with her, even if it complicated everything else. Mateo brushed his thumb across her cheek one last time. Get some sleep, he said softly. Tomorrow is not about proving anything to her. Sarah whispered. Then what is it about? Mateo's eyes held hers. It's about you hearing yourself say it, he replied. So you never doubt where you stand again. Sarah's throat tightened. She nodded slowly. Mateo leaned in and kissed her again, shorter, steadier, like a promise. Then he stepped back, eyes still on her, hand lingering at her waist for one last second before letting go. Sarah watched him walk toward the living room, watched him greet Olivia, watched him slip back into a controlled version of himself. But now she knew what was under the control. She looked down at her phone again, at Victoria's message. 1 sentence from him. 1 sentence from her. Sarah whispered to herself, barely audible. What sentence? And as the question hung in the quiet kitchen, Sarah realized tomorrow morning wasn't only about being seen. It was about whether she was ready to speak her truth out loud. Right beside Matteo Conti, while the world listened. The conference room clock clicked to 9:01 a.m. exactly. Sarah felt the sound in her bones. She stood beside Matteo at the long polished table, her fingers lightly threaded with his under the table, hidden from the 2 board witnesses seated across from them, but not hidden from Matteo. His thumb pressed once against her knuckles, steady and calm, like a private promise. Across the table, Victoria Hale sat perfectly composed, a folder closed in front of her, a cup of tea untouched. Olivia stood near the glass wall, arms crossed, watching with the relaxed face of someone trying not to set the room on fire with her sarcasm. Victoria's eyes moved to Sarah first, measuring, clinical, and a little too sure. Then Victoria looked at Matteo. "Good morning," Victoria said politely. "We'll keep this simple." Matteo's posture didn't change. "That was your request." Victoria nodded. "One sentence from you, one sentence from her, and this ends." Sarah's heart beat hard, but she kept her shoulders relaxed. The fear she'd felt earlier had changed into something else now, something stronger, a quiet refusal to be treated like a test. Victoria slid a single sheet of paper toward Matteo. Before the sentences, a clarification. Matteo didn't touch the paper. "Speak." Victoria's lips curved faintly. "You're learning." "Good." She turned to the two witnesses. "For the record, this meeting concerns the Conti family trust, the voting rights linked to it, and the final step required to transfer full control to Matteo Conti." Sarah's stomach tightened. So that was it. The conditions. Not just reputation, not just image. Control. Victoria looked back at Matteo. "You inherit full authority when you demonstrate stability, not only operationally, but emotionally." Matteo didn't flinch. "You don't get to grade my emotions." Victoria's tone stayed calm. "I do, actually. Your father wrote it into the trust, after what he did to your mother." A sharp silence settled. Sarah's fingers tightened around Matteo's, then softened when she felt him squeeze back, slow, controlled, grounding. Victoria continued, voice still polite, but the meaning landed heavy. "Your father believed love made men reckless. He believed affection made people weak. He believed women were liabilities." Sarah's throat tightened. Olivia's jaw hardened. She didn't speak, but Sarah saw it, the anger she'd been swallowing for years. Victoria looked at Sarah now. "I didn't create this system," she said quietly. "I'm ending it." Sarah didn't trust her tone. "By humiliating me? By moving me around like a prop?" Victoria held her gaze. "By forcing Matteo to stop using distance as a shield. The same way his father did. The same way his father taught him." Matteo's hand lifted slightly, still under the table, his thumb brushing Sarah's knuckle in a slow circle, like he could sense her rising temperature and wanted to cool it. Victoria looked back at Matteo. "I watched you in that lobby," she said. "You were ready to lose control over a hug that wasn't even romantic." Matteo's eyes stayed cold. "And you enjoyed that?" "No," Victoria replied. "I recognized it. You didn't learn jealousy from nowhere. You learned it from watching love become a weapon in this family." Sarah held still. This was the first bombshell that didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an explanation. Victoria leaned forward a fraction. "I needed to see if you would keep repeating the pattern. Hide her, distance her, reduce her to a role so no one could use her." Matteo's voice dropped. "And when you realized you were wrong?" Victoria's expression softened just slightly. "Then I decided to give you a way out." Olivia let out a quiet laugh with no humor. "By terrorizing his assistant." Victoria glanced at Olivia. "By pressuring him into the one thing that ends pressure permanently." Sarah's pulse hammered. She didn't like Victoria. She didn't forgive her. But Sarah understood exactly what Victoria meant. Public truth. Matteo's jaw flexed once. "You could have asked." Victoria shook her head. "He would have answered with strategy, not with truth." Matteo didn't deny it. Sarah felt it. How hard that was for him to hear and accept. Victoria turned her attention fully to Sarah, voice calm. "Sarah Davis, before you speak your sentence, I want you to know something." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What?" Victoria opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. Sarah's breath caught. The photo showed Ethan Davis, Sarah's father, standing in front of a hospital entrance, younger, smiling faintly, one arm around a woman with dark hair and tired eyes. The woman's face was familiar in a way that made Sarah's skin go cold. Olivia stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Where did you get that?" Victoria's voice stayed steady. "That woman is your mother." Sarah's heart lurched. "My mother!" Olivia's voice went sharp. "That's not possible." Mateo stared at the photo, his expression changing. Subtle, but real. Something moved behind his eyes. Victoria met Sarah's gaze. "Your mother worked with the Conti family years ago, not in the company." "In the private world you don't see." Sarah swallowed hard. "My mother died when I was a kid." Victoria nodded slowly. "I know, and that is part of why I didn't want you pulled into this without truth." Sarah's voice trembled despite her effort. "What truth?" Victoria pointed to the photo. "Your father protected her. He got her out. He helped her disappear." Sarah's hands went numb. "Disappear from what?" Olivia's voice cracked like a whip. "From my father." Silence hit. Sarah's stomach dropped. Mateo's fingers tightened around hers, a slow pulse of pressure. Victoria spoke gently now, less like a judge and more like someone tired of old damage. "Your father and your mother were part of the same plan. Get her away before Alessandro Conti could destroy what was left of her." Sarah couldn't breathe for a second. "My father never told me," she whispered. "Because he wanted you free," Victoria replied. "Not raised inside a legacy that taught women to shrink." Sarah blinked rapidly, trying to keep her mind from spinning out. Mateo's voice cut in, low and controlled. "Why show her this now?" Victoria held Mateo's gaze. "Because you need to understand what you're protecting." Mateo's jaw clenched. "I'm protecting Sarah." "Yes," Victoria said, "and you're protecting her from the exact kind of man you were trained to become." Sarah's throat tightened. That was the second bombshell. Not a threat. A mirror. Victoria straightened. "Now we do what we came for. One sentence each." She looked at Mateo. "Go." Mateo didn't speak immediately. He stood slowly, jacket perfect, posture calm, face unreadable, except for his eyes. His eyes were on Sarah. He didn't look away from her when he spoke. "Sarah Davis is not my assistant," Mateo said, voice steady. "She is the woman I choose openly, with respect, today and every day after." Sarah's breath caught. The witnesses didn't react. They just wrote. Victoria's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened for half a second, like she'd been waiting for that exact phrasing. Then Victoria turned to Sarah. "Your sentence?" Sarah's mouth went dry. She felt the weight of every day she'd swallowed her feelings and hid behind competence. She felt the sting of being moved, watched, evaluated. And she felt something else too. Mateo's hand under the table, still holding hers, still steady. Sarah stood. Her voice came out calm, not loud, not dramatic, honest. "I'm not here because of my job," Sarah said. "I'm here because I want him, without being hidden, without being used, and without losing myself." Mateo's breath shifted, a subtle exhale, like relief. Victoria nodded once. "For the record, that is consent and choice." She turned to the witnesses. "The condition is met." One of the witnesses, an older woman with silver hair, looked up briefly. "Confirmed." The other witness nodded. "Confirmed." Victoria closed her folder. And just like that, the tension that had stalked Sarah for days loosened its grip. But Sarah didn't feel triumphant. She felt raw, because truth was a relief and a risk at the same time. Mateo sat back down slowly, then looked at Victoria. "It ends," he said. Victoria held his gaze. "It ends." Olivia exhaled loud enough to be dramatic, then walked out of the room as if she needed air before she said something that would ruin her normal sister image. Victoria stood too. "Mateo," she said, and her voice softened. "Don't repeat him." Mateo's eyes were cold. "I won't." Victoria looked at Sarah again. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "But I will say this. You're stronger than the women in this family were allowed to be." Sarah's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask to be tested." "I know," Victoria replied. And you're right." Then she turned and left. The door closed behind her. The witnesses gathered their papers and quietly excused themselves. And suddenly, the room was just Sarah and Matteo. A quiet that felt completely different from the fear quiet of the last few days. This quiet felt private, real. Sarah's hands started to tremble now that she didn't have to be steady for anyone else. Matteo stood and came to her without hesitation. He didn't ask permission this time. He simply opened his arms. Sarah stepped into him like her body had been waiting for it for months. Matteo held her tightly, not rough, not desperate. Firm and warm, like he was anchoring her to something safe. "I'm sorry," Matteo murmured into her hair. Sarah's voice was muffled against his chest. "For what part?" "For letting you get pulled into the legacy," he said quietly. "For making you feel like you had to be perfect to be safe." Sarah swallowed. "I didn't feel safe because of perfection." Matteo pulled back slightly, eyes searching her face. "Then what made you feel safe?" Sarah's voice softened. "You showing up. You listening. You choosing." Matteo's jaw tightened, as if the words hit him too hard. He brushed his thumb along her cheeks slowly. "I will never make you a secret again." Sarah's throat tightened. "And what about work?" Matteo's mouth curved faintly. "We fix it properly." Sarah blinked. "Properly?" Matteo reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a slim folder. Sarah frowned. "Matteo." He handed it to her. Inside was a single letter with her name printed cleanly at the top. Director of Operations, Conti Holdings. Sarah stared. "This is real?" "It's overdue," Matteo replied. "You already do the work. Now you have the authority." Sarah looked up at him, overwhelmed. "You're doing this because I respect you," Matteo said, steady, "and because I refuse to let anyone imply you're only close to me because you're beneath me." Sarah's eyes burned. "I don't want to be a headline." "You won't be," Matteo promised. "You'll be respected." She exhaled, trying to steady herself. "My dad." Matteo nodded immediately. "We tell him today, together. No surprises." Sarah's chest tightened. "He's going to be furious." Matteo's expression was calm. "He can be furious at me. I can take it." Sarah studied him. "You're not afraid?" Matteo leaned closer, voice low. "I'm afraid of losing you, not of a conversation." That made her laugh softly through the emotion. That's a very Matteo answer. He kissed her forehead, slow and warm. "Come with me." Ethan Davis didn't open his apartment door with a smile. He opened it with the face of a man who had been polite for days and was finished being polite. Sarah barely stepped inside before Ethan pulled her into a tight hug, his arms strong, protective, familiar. "You okay?" he asked immediately, scanning her face. "I'm okay," Sarah said softly. "I'm okay." Then Ethan's gaze moved past her to Matteo standing at the doorway. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You." Matteo nodded once. "Mr. Davis." Ethan scoffed. "Don't Mr. Davis is me." Sarah stepped between them instinctively. "Dad." Ethan's eyes softened for Sarah, then hardened again for Matteo. "He did this to you?" Ethan asked. Matteo answered before Sarah could. "Yes." Sarah blinked. Matteo continued, voice steady. "I brought her into a world that should never touch her. And I'm sorry." Ethan stared at him, surprised by the direct admission. Sarah watched her father's expression shift. Confusion, suspicion, then a reluctant respect for the honesty. Ethan exhaled, slow. "Say what you came to say." Matteo looked at Sarah first, asking without words if she was ready. Sarah nodded. Matteo's voice was calm. "Your daughter isn't my assistant anymore." Ethan's eyes widened. "What?" "She's director of operations," Matteo said. "And she's with me because she chose to be." Sarah's father stared at her. "Sarah." Sarah stepped closer to him, voice gentle. "I chose it, Dad. Not because I was pressured. Not because I was scared. Because I want him." Ethan went very still, Then he looked back at Mateo, voice low. And you? Mateo didn't flinch. I choose her, publicly, permanently, with respect. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Respect is not a word you can say once. It's a life. Mateo nodded. Then I'll live it. A long silence. Then Ethan looked at Sarah, voice softer. You're sure? Sarah nodded, eyes shining. Yes. Ethan exhaled slowly, then surprised her by laughing, just once, short and tense. Of course you'd fall for the most complicated man in New York. Sarah laughed through her tears. He's not, Ethan pointed at Mateo. He is. Mateo's mouth tightened like he was fighting a smile. Fair. Ethan stepped closer to Mateo, face serious again. If she ever feels small around you, Ethan said quietly, I'll be a problem. Mateo met his gaze. I understand. Ethan's voice lowered further. And if anyone tries to use her again? Mateo's answer came without hesitation. They won't get close enough to try. Ethan studied him for a long beat. Then finally he nodded once. Not approval. Permission. A father's reluctant acceptance. Sarah felt her body loosen, relief washing through her so hard her knees went weak. Mateo's hand found the small of her back, steadying her instantly. Ethan noticed. He didn't comment. He just said, you two should sit. Olivia, who had apparently been waiting in the hallway like a gremlin with excellent timing, popped her head in. Hi, I brought coffee, because this is basically a family meeting now and I refuse to be left out. Sarah laughed. Real laughter, the kind that made her feel like herself again. Ethan stared. Who are you? Olivia smiled sweetly. The normal one. Mateo muttered. She's lying. Olivia grinned. I'm the fun one. For the first time in days, the air felt light, and Sarah realized something important. This is what safety looked like. Not hiding. Not distance. People standing in the open, choosing each other anyway. That night, back at Mateo's penthouse, the city lights felt less like a wall and more like a view. Sarah stood near the window in a soft sweater Mateo's sister had insisted she take, warm tea in her hands. Mateo came up behind her slowly, careful not to startle her, and wrapped his arms around her waist. Sarah leaned back into him immediately, her body finally allowing itself to rest. You did it, she whispered. Mateo kissed her neck gently, just under her ear. We did it. Sarah turned in his arms, looking up at him. I still don't like your aunt. Mateo's mouth curved faintly. You don't have to. Sarah searched his face. Are you okay? Really? Mateo's eyes softened. I'm lighter. Sarah smiled. Because you stopped performing. Mateo nodded. Because I stopped pretending love was a weakness. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of his tie, slow. And what are we now? Mateo's gaze dropped to her mouth, then lifted back to her eyes. We're honest. Sarah's voice turned quieter. And what do you want, Mateo? He didn't answer with strategy. He didn't answer with control. He answered like a man. I want mornings with you, he said. I want you in my home without you feeling like you're trespassing. I want you to take up space and never apologize. I want you to look at me and know you're safe. Sarah's throat tightened. That's a lot. Mateo's thumb brushed her cheek. You deserve a lot. Sarah whispered. And you? Mateo's voice dropped. I want you to choose me, even when I'm not perfect. Sarah smiled softly. Then stop trying to be perfect. Mateo's eyes held hers for a long beat. Then he stepped back slightly, reaching into his pocket. Sarah blinked. What are you doing? Mateo's jaw flexed once, the smallest sign of nerves she'd ever seen from him. He opened his hand. A ring box. Sarah froze. Mateo's voice was steady, but quieter than usual. I'm not doing this because of my aunt, or the trust, or the company. Sarah's breath shook. I'm doing this, Mateo continued, because I'm tired of waiting for a safer time that never comes. He held her gaze, eyes dark and honest. "Sarah Davis," he said softly, "will you marry me?" Sarah's heart slammed so hard she felt dizzy. Her lips parted. No sound came out. Mateo didn't rush her. He just watched her face like her answer was the only thing in the world. Sarah blinked rapidly, tears rising, and before she could speak, her phone buzzed on the counter behind her. One single vibration, a new unknown message. Sarah's breath caught as she turned her head slightly, frozen between joy and instinct. Mateo's eyes flicked toward the phone, then back to her. His hand stayed steady, box still open. His voice stayed low. "Ignore it." Sarah swallowed hard, because the question wasn't only will she say yes, it was whether she could finally choose happiness without flinching, even if the past tried to pull her attention away at the exact moment her future opened in front of her. Sarah didn't look at the phone. Not this time. Her breath shook, her eyes wet, and her heart was so full it felt almost unreal, but she held Mateo's gaze and stayed right there in the moment he was offering her, openly, without excuses, without hiding. Mateo's hand didn't move. The ring box remained open, steady in his palm, as if he'd decided he would wait forever if that's what she needed. Sarah swallowed hard. "Yes," she whispered. Mateo's eyes softened in a way that made her chest ache. "Yes?" he repeated like he needed to hear it again. "Yes," Sarah said again, louder this time, voice warm and sure. "Yes, Mateo, I'll marry you." Something in Mateo's face broke, just a fraction of control giving way to pure relief. He closed his eyes for a second, exhaling like he'd been carrying the weight of restraint for years and had finally put it down. Then he stood closer, careful and reverent, and slid the ring onto her finger with hands that were usually unshakable. It fit perfectly. Sarah let out a laugh that turned into a quiet sob, and Mateo immediately pulled her into his arms, holding her as if the entire city could watch, and it still wouldn't matter. "I'm not letting anything steal this from you," he murmured against her hair. Sarah closed her eyes. "Good, because I don't want to run anymore." Mateo tilted her chin up and kissed her, slow, deep, unhurried. Not like a secret, like a promise made in the open. When they finally pulled back, Sarah glanced at the phone again, still buzzing softly on the counter. Mateo picked it up before she could. He checked the screen once, then his expression didn't change, because nothing about that message deserved to touch their joy. He deleted it without reading it out loud. Sarah's lips parted. What did it say? Mateo slipped the phone into his pocket. It said they don't like losing. Sarah's pulse jumped, but Mateo's hands cupped her face, anchoring her. "They already lost," he said calmly, "because you're not scared anymore." Sarah stared at him, then slowly nodded. "I'm not." Mateo kissed her forehead. "Good." 2 months later, Conti Holdings looked the same from the outside. Sleek, powerful, untouchable. Inside, everything felt different. Sarah walked through the building with a new kind of confidence, not because she wore a new title, but because she no longer carried herself like she had to earn the right to exist in the room. She had her own office now, a real one, not a borrowed desk. Her name on the door in clean, simple letters. Sarah Davis, Director of Operations. On her desk sat 2 photos. One was of her father, smiling like he was trying to look serious but failing. The other was a candid shot Olivia had taken. Sarah laughing in Mateo's kitchen, holding a mug, Mateo behind her with his arms around her waist, his face resting near her hair like he couldn't help himself. It was the first photo Sarah had ever allowed herself to keep in a workplace, and no one dared question it. Not because Mateo was feared, because Sarah was respected. Mateo had made that happen with policies and structure, yes, but mostly with consistency. He showed up the same way every day. He listened. He gave credit. He stopped treating love as an exception he had to hide. And the people around him adjusted, because power could be cold, or power could be steady. Mateo chose steady. The first Sunday Sarah spent with Mateo's family felt almost normal. Almost. Olivia had insisted on hosting dinner, claiming it was to celebrate the engagement, but really it was because she loved having an excuse to tease Matteo in front of witnesses. Ethan arrived with a bottle of wine and the face of a man who was still deciding whether to approve this whole situation. But he hugged Sarah first. Always Sarah first. "You happy?" Ethan asked quietly while Olivia argued with Matteo about whether he'd ever smiled as a child. Sarah smiled softly. "I am." Ethan studied her face for a long beat, then nodded. "Okay." That was all he said, but it was everything. Later, when Matteo stepped outside to take a call, Ethan followed. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as her father and her fiancé stood on the patio, two strong men facing each other under the soft glow of outdoor lights. Ethan said something. Matteo listened. Then Matteo nodded once, slow, serious. When they came back inside, Ethan didn't look pleased, but he looked calmer. Olivia leaned toward Sarah and whispered, "Your dad basically threatened Matteo in 12 different ways." Sarah whispered back, "And Matteo?" Olivia grinned. Matteo looked like he was taking notes. Sarah laughed quietly, warmth spreading through her chest. A few weeks later, Sarah and Matteo took a short trip. No press, no big announcement, no audience. Just them. A quiet coastal town, a private terrace, early mornings with coffee while the sky changed colors. Matteo didn't wear a suit once. Sarah didn't check her email until noon. On the second night, Sarah found Matteo sitting on the balcony, staring at the ocean like he was thinking too hard. She sat beside him, shoulder touching his. "What are you doing in that head?" she asked. Matteo's mouth curved slightly, learning how to be happy without waiting for something to go wrong. Sarah reached for his hand. "You don't have to wait anymore." Matteo looked at her then, eyes steady. "I know, I'm trying to let it feel real." Sarah leaned in and kissed him softly. "It is real." Matteo's fingers tightened around hers. "I still can't believe you said yes." Sarah smiled. "I can." Matteo raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" Sarah's voice softened. "Because you didn't just choose me once. You chose me every day you didn't have to." Matteo didn't speak for a moment. Then he kissed her hand, slow, reverent. "I'll keep doing that," he promised, "for the rest of my life." Sarah's eyes burned. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." Matteo's gaze warmed. "Neither am I." On a bright morning in late spring, Sarah stood in front of a mirror while Olivia fixed a small piece of hair near her face like she was a professional stylist and not a woman who enjoyed chaos. "You look too calm," Olivia said suspiciously. Sarah laughed softly. "I'm not calm." Olivia squinted. "You're glowing. It's rude." Sarah rolled her eyes. "You're dramatic." Olivia leaned closer. "And you're marrying my brother, so we both have problems." Sarah turned her head slightly, looking at the ring on her finger. The symbol wasn't what made her feel safe. Matteo's consistency did. His gentleness when no one watched. His respect when everyone watched. His hands on her waist in the kitchen like it was the most normal thing in the world. Olivia stepped back, eyes softer now. "He's going to cry," she said quietly. Sarah blinked. "Matteo?" Olivia nodded. "He's been practicing not crying all week. It's not going well." Sarah laughed through a sudden sting of emotion. "Good." Olivia smiled. "He deserves this." Sarah nodded. "So do we." When Sarah walked down the aisle, she didn't feel like she was stepping into Matteo's world. She felt like she was stepping into theirs. Matteo stood at the front, looking like he'd forgotten how to breathe. His suit was perfect, but his eyes were raw with emotion, fixed on Sarah as if she was the only light in the room. Ethan walked beside her, strong and steady. Halfway down, Ethan leaned in and murmured, "If he messes this up, I'll be the first one to help you bury him." Sarah let out a laugh that made a few guests turn and smile. Matteo's eyes widened slightly when he saw her laugh, like he couldn't believe he'd caused that kind of joy. When Sarah finally reached him, Matteo took her hands and held them tight. "You're here," he whispered. Sarah smiled, voice soft. "I'm here." Matteo swallowed hard. "You're really here." Sarah squeezed his hands. Stop acting surprised. You earned this. Matteo's eyes went glossy. Olivia, sitting in the front row, mouthed dramatically, "He's crying." Sarah's shoulders shook with quiet laughter. Matteo laughed too, through the emotion like he couldn't hold back anymore. And in that moment, everything that had once felt like danger, pressure, and tests melted into something simple. Two people choosing each other, openly, without fear. When the officiant asked them to speak their vows, Matteo didn't try to sound powerful. He sounded honest. "I spent my life thinking control was protection," he said, voice steady but thick. "Then you walked into my world and showed me what protection actually looks like. It looks like respect. It looks like listening. It looks like choosing you every day and never making you feel small." Sarah's eyes filled. Matteo continued, gaze locked on hers. "You made me better. You made me softer without making me weaker. And I promise you, I will never hide you. And I will never hide from you." Sarah swallowed, then spoke with quiet certainty. "I thought love meant losing myself," she said. "But you didn't ask me to shrink. You asked me to be seen, and I promise you, Matteo, I will love you loudly and safely. I will tell you the truth even when it's hard. I will choose you the way you chose me, on purpose." Matteo exhaled, trembling, then smiled with his whole face. When they kissed, it wasn't rushed, it was slow, certain, a celebration, not an escape. And when the guests cheered, Sarah didn't flinch. She leaned into it. She leaned into him. Because for the first time, being seen felt like freedom. That night, in their quiet penthouse, Sarah stood barefoot near the window, city lights stretching out below them like 1,000 small promises. Matteo came up behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. "Mrs. Conti," he murmured. Sarah smiled softly. "Don't get used to it." Matteo kissed her shoulder. "Too late." Sarah leaned back against him. "Do you feel different?" Matteo's breath warmed her neck. "Yes." "How?" Matteo turned her gently to face him, hands steady on her hips. "I feel like I can finally live," he said. "Not just manage." Sarah's chest tightened. "Then live." Matteo's eyes softened. "With you?" Sarah smiled. "Always." Matteo kissed her again, slow and warm, and Sarah realized she wasn't stepping into a dangerous legacy anymore. She was building something new, a love that didn't need secrecy to survive, a love that didn't turn women into liabilities. A love that made both of them softer, stronger, and free. And for the first time, the Conti name meant something Sarah could be proud of. Not because it was powerful, because it had finally learned how to be good.